Let's be honest, Mia's the family's failure. My brother Damien's words cut through the penthouse air like a blade through silk. The wine glass trembled in my hand as polite laughter rippled around his mahogany dining table. I watched my father stare at his untouched creme brulee, my mother whisper wasted potential to my aunt, and my cousins, whose websites I'd built for free just 2 years ago, suddenly find their dessert spoons fascinating. But I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because I'd already made my move. My name is Mia Whitlock, and I've never fit the family mold. While my siblings climbed corporate ladders in their pressed suits and gleaming offices, I chose a different path: freelance content strategy, digital marketing, and brand storytelling. From my modest apartment, I'd quietly built what I knew was an empire, even if it was invisible to everyone else. The Whitlocks were old money trying to look like new money. Appearances mattered more than actual success. Every family gathering was a performance where net worth was worn like jewelry and job titles were currency. My parents, Margaret and Charles Whitlock, had raised us to believe that success meant corner offices, business cards with impressive titles, and the kind of careers that looked good at country club dinners. Damien, my older brother by 3 years, embodied everything they wanted. Senior marketing director at Cromwell & Associates, he drove a BMW, lived in a penthouse, and spoke in corporate buzzwords that made our parents beam with pride. He'd always been the golden child. Quarterback in high school, business degree. From an Ivy League school, married to a lawyer who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Then there was me. The disappointment. The one who wasted her potential by choosing to work from home in yoga pants, building brands for startups and mid-sized companies they'd never heard of. What they didn't understand, what they never bothered to ask about, was that my client list included Fortune 500 companies, tech unicorns, and international brands. My income had surpassed Damien's 2 years ago, but I'd learned to keep that information to myself. Our relationship hadn't always been toxic. As children, Damien had been protective, even kind. He'd helped me with homework, defended me from bullies, and we'd spent countless summers building forts in our backyard. But success had changed him, or maybe it had just revealed who he really was. The protectiveness had turned to condescension, the kindness to calculated cruelty. Every family gathering became an opportunity for him to remind everyone of my failures. At my cousin Sarah's wedding, he'd introduced me to his colleagues as my sister who plays on computers. At Christmas dinner, he'd asked loudly if I'd found a real job yet. The family would laugh, thinking it was harmless sibling teasing, but I saw the malice in his eyes. This year's reunion was hosted in his new penthouse, a glass monument to his success overlooking the city. The invitation had arrived last, almost, as an afterthought. Casual dress, it said, though everyone would be wearing their finest. I'd been seated at the far end of the table, next to Great Aunt Edith, who was half-deaf and spent most of dinner talking about her cats. The signs had been building for months before that dinner. Small cruelties that accumulated like paper cuts. In January, I'd received a call from my cousin Jake, Damien's best friend since college. "Hey Mia, I'm starting a consulting firm and could use help with branding. Damien said you might do it cheap, since we're family." When I quoted my standard rate, the same rate I charged million-dollar companies, Jake had laughed. "Come on, Damien said you'd do it for free. Family discount, right?" I'd done the work anyway, at a fraction of my rate, because I still believed in family loyalty. The brand identity I created for Jake's firm was stunning, sophisticated, modern, and memorable. 6 months later, he landed 3 major clients who specifically mentioned being drawn to his professional image. He never thanked me. In March, at my mother's birthday dinner, Damien had cornered me by the bar. "You know, Mia, it's time to grow up. This online thing of yours, it's not sustainable. What happens when the internet fad passes?" He'd said it, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear, his tone patronizing and dismissive. "I could probably get you an entry-level position at my firm. Administrative work, but it's a start." The sting was immediate and sharp. I just finished a campaign for a major automotive brand that had increased their online engagement by 400%. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, working with clients who respected my expertise and valued my insight. But to Damien, I was still his little sister playing games on the computer. In June, the betrayal deepened. My cousin Lisa was getting married and needed help with her wedding website. I spent weeks crafting something beautiful, elegant, functional, with an integrated RSVP system and photo galleries. When I presented it to her, she was thrilled. "This is amazing, Mia. You're so talented." At the wedding reception, I overheard Damien talking to a group of relatives. "Poor Mia," he was saying, shaking his head with mock sympathy. "She's got this fantasy that she's some kind of business owner. Mom and Dad are worried she'll never get a real job. She's already 32 and still living in that tiny apartment, pretending her hobby is a career." The words felt like physical blows. I'd been supporting myself comfortably for years, had clients on 3 continents, and had built a reputation in my industry that I was genuinely proud of. But in that moment, surrounded by family who nodded along with Damien's assessment, I felt small and ashamed. The final straw came in September. I'd been working on a project that I couldn't discuss due to confidentiality agreements, but it was the biggest opportunity of my career. A global tech firm was considering a complete rebrand, and they'd reached out to me based on my reputation in the industry. The project was worth more than Damien made in 2 years. During a family barbecue at my parents' house, Damien pulled me aside. "Listen, Mia, I need to tell you something." His voice was serious, almost gentle. For a moment, I thought he might finally acknowledge my success, maybe even apologize for his behavior. Instead, he said, "I've been talking to Mom and Dad. We're all worried about you. This delusion you have about being successful, it's not healthy. You're living in a fantasy world, and it's time someone told you the truth. You're embarrassing the family." The words hit me like a physical force. I stared at him, seeing not my brother but a stranger wearing his face. The boy who had once protected me from bullies had become the biggest bully of all. That night, I sat in my apartment, my tiny apartment that I owned outright, in a neighborhood he couldn't afford, and made a decision. I was done being the family disappointment. I was done trying to prove myself to people who refused to see my worth. I was done being nice. The moment of absolute clarity came 3 weeks before the reunion dinner. I was in my home office, reviewing the final proposals for the tech firm project, when my phone rang. It was my mother. "Mia, darling, I need to ask you something." Her voice had that careful tone she used when she was about to say something hurtful, but wanted to pretend it was concern. "Damien mentioned that you're still struggling with work. He said business has been slow?" I nearly laughed. Business had never been better. I'd just signed 3 new clients and was about to close the biggest deal of my career. "Actually, Mom, things are..." Because he had an idea, she continued, cutting me off. "His firm is hiring for a social media coordinator position. Entry level, but it's a real job with benefits. He could put in a good word for you." The condescension was breathtaking. A social media coordinator, entry level. As if my years of experience, my client list, my success meant nothing. As if I was some college graduate desperate for any opportunity. "Mom, I know you're proud, sweetie, but pride won't pay the bills forever. We just want what's best for you. Damien does too. He loves you, you know. We all do." After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. This wasn't love. This was systematic dismissal, carefully orchestrated humiliation designed to keep me in my place. Damien hadn't just been casually cruel. He'd been actively working to undermine my confidence, to convince our family that I was failing even as I succeeded. That's when I realized the truth. Nothing would change unless I changed it. They would never see my success as long as they were committed to seeing my failure. They would never respect me as long as they benefited from dismissing me. They would never stop unless I made them stop. I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about Cromwell and Associates, about Damien's recent projects, about his professional reputation. What I found was illuminating. Damien's firm was struggling. They'd lost 2 major clients in the past year, and their reputation in the industry was mediocre at best. More importantly, I discovered that they'd been pitching aggressively to the same tech firm that had approached me. For months, Damien had been telling our family about this big deal he was about to close, the contract that would make his career. He had no idea that the client he was chasing had already chosen their creative director. Me. As I scrolled through industry publications and professional networks, I began to see the full picture. Damien wasn't the success story he pretended to be. His firm was considered outdated, their strategies conventional, their results uninspiring. He'd built his reputation on appearance rather than substance, on networking rather than skill. But what struck me most was something else I discovered. 3 of the companies on his client roster had specifically requested digital marketing overhauls in the past year. All 3 had been quietly advised to seek external specialists. All 3 had been given my name by industry contacts. Damien had been coasting on mediocrity while I built excellence. He'd been taking credit for the family's success while actively sabotaging my reputation. He'd been playing politics while I mastered my craft. The breaking point wasn't just about the hurt anymore, it was about justice. It was about truth. It was about ensuring that actions had consequences and that talent was rewarded over treachery. I spent the next week crafting a plan, not born from anger, though I was angry, but from cold, calculated strategy. Damien had taught me that appearances mattered in our family. He was about to learn that reality mattered more. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. Damien's greatest weakness was his arrogance. He never bothered to research his competition because he assumed he was superior. He also never asked about my work because he genuinely believed it was worthless. These blind spots would be his downfall. The foundation was already in place. For 3 months, I'd been working closely with Meridian Global, the tech firm Damien was desperately trying to land. They'd approached me through my professional network, impressed by a campaign I'd developed for a similar company. The project was massive, a complete rebrand, digital strategy overhaul, and global marketing campaign worth $2.8 million over 2 years. What made this perfect was that Damien had no idea I was involved. Meridian was notoriously secretive about their projects, using code names and confidentiality agreements that would make the CIA proud. All Damien knew was that they were considering multiple firms and that landing this contract would transform his career. My strategy had 3 phases, each designed to maximize the psychological impact while maintaining complete deniability. Phase 1. The setup. I would finalize my contract with Meridian, but request that the announcement be delayed until after Damien's final presentation. This would allow him to invest maximum emotional energy and professional capital into a deal he'd already lost. I specifically asked Meridian to schedule his presentation for the day before our family reunion, ensuring he'd be at peak confidence when the betrayal was revealed. I also began documenting every interaction with our family, every dismissive comment, every condescending gesture. I wasn't doing this for evidence. I was doing it to understand exactly how deep the humiliation needed to go to create lasting change. Phase 2. The revelation. The timing had to be perfect. I would allow Damien to give his toast, to publicly humiliate me one final time in front of our entire family. This would establish the stakes and ensure that everyone present understood the dynamics at play. Then, exactly 48 hours later, when Meridian announced their decision, the contrast would be impossible to ignore. But the announcement itself wasn't enough. I needed to ensure the whole family understood the magnitude of what had happened. So, I designed a presentation, not unlike the ones I created for clients, that would tell the complete story. Damien's failures, his firm's struggles, the size of the contract he'd lost, and my role in his downfall. Phase 3. The aftermath. This phase required the most careful planning. I needed to ensure that the consequences were permanent and proportional. It wasn't enough for Damien to lose one contract. He needed to understand that his behavior had cost him his reputation, his career, and his standing in the family. I began reaching out to my professional network, quietly investigating opportunities for strategic partnerships and collaborations. What I discovered was that several companies were looking for exactly the kind of modern, digital-first marketing approach that Damien's firm couldn't provide. More importantly, 3 of these companies were current clients of Cromwell and Associates, frustrated with outdated strategies and poor results. I crafted a series of proposals that would effectively poach Damien's remaining major clients. not through underhanded tactics, but by offering superior service, better results, and more competitive pricing. I would present these opportunities immediately after the Meridian announcement, when his professional reputation was at its lowest point. The beauty of this approach was that it was entirely ethical. I was simply providing better service to companies that needed it. If this happened to devastate Damien's career, that was merely a consequence of his own professional inadequacy. But there was one more element to my plan, something that would ensure the lesson was never forgotten. I commissioned a custom frame, sleek, black, and elegant, and had it professionally engraved with a simple message: "From your family's failure, with love." Inside, I would place a copy of the signed Meridian contract, highlighting the financial terms and my role as creative director. This frame would arrive at Damien's office exactly 1 week after his termination, ensuring that he understood the connection between his cruelty and his consequences. It would be the last communication he ever received from me, a permanent reminder that actions have prices and that talent ultimately triumphs over treachery. The plan was perfect because it used Damien's own weapons against him. He'd built his reputation on appearance and politics. I would destroy it with substance and skill. He'd used family gatherings to humiliate me. I would use the next family gathering to showcase my success. He'd dismissed my work as worthless. I would prove its value by taking everything he'd worked for. Most importantly, the plan would reveal the truth to our entire family. They would see that their failure had been succeeding all along, and their success story had been built on lies and mediocrity. The cognitive dissonance would be devastating and permanent. As I finalized the details, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years around my family: excitement. Not for the destruction I was about to cause, but for the liberation I was about to achieve. After years of being diminished and dismissed, I was finally going to show them who I really was. The execution began 3 days before the reunion. I had my final meeting with Meridian's executive team, presenting the completed brand strategy that would redefine their global presence. The presentation was flawless: 18 months of research, strategy, and creative development distilled into 90 minutes of compelling storytelling. "This is exactly what we envisioned," said Patricia Chen, their chief marketing officer. "Your understanding of our brand DNA is remarkable. We're excited to move forward." As I signed the contract, I felt a surge of professional pride that had nothing to do with revenge. This was legitimately the best work I'd ever done for a client who genuinely valued my expertise. That it would also destroy my brother was simply a bonus. "One request," I said as we concluded. "I'd like to keep this confidential until after your announcement next week. I have a family situation that requires careful timing." Patricia nodded. "Of course, we'll issue the press release Monday morning as planned." That evening, I received a text from Damien. "Big day tomorrow, about to close the deal that changes everything. Maybe you should think about that job offer. I might not be able to help you much longer." The emoji was perfectly Damien: cocky, condescending, and completely oblivious to reality. I responded with a simple, "Good luck," and then turned off my phone. Saturday morning, the day of the reunion, I spent 2 hours preparing. Not just my appearance, though I chose my outfit carefully, a sleek black dress that was professional but not flashy, but my mindset. I meditated, practiced my reactions, and reminded myself that this wasn't about anger anymore. This was about justice. I arrived at Damien's penthouse exactly on time. The gathering was everything I expected: our parents holding court by the floor-to-ceiling windows, cousins clustered around the bar comparing stock portfolios, aunts and uncles discussing real estate values and their children's achievements. I was greeted with the usual mix of polite smiles and subtle dismissal. "Mia, how are you, dear?" My Aunt Helen kissed my cheek while scanning the room for more interesting conversation partners. "Still doing the computer thing?" "Still doing the computer thing," I confirmed, accepting a glass of wine from the server. Dinner proceeded exactly as scripted. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to Great Aunt Edith and her endless cat stories. The conversation flowed around me: business deals, vacation homes, children's private school acceptances. While I smiled and nodded and waited, Damien was in his element, regaling everyone with stories of his professional conquests. The Meridian. Deal should be finalized this week, he announced during the main course. It's the kind of contract that sets you up for life, you know? Generational wealth. Our father beamed with pride. That's my boy. Always thinking big. It's all about positioning, Damien continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never experienced real failure. You have to understand what clients actually need, not just what they think they want. It's a skill that takes years to develop. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. As dessert arrived, Damien stood up, his wine glass catching the light from the chandelier above. The room quieted as he prepared to speak. This was his moment, his chance to cement his position as the family's golden child, while simultaneously reminding everyone of my failures. I wanted to make a toast, he began, his voice carrying across the penthouse, to family, to success, and to knowing your place in the world. My heart rate didn't increase. My hands didn't shake. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. We've all worked hard to get where we are, he continued, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. Well, most of us have. Let's be honest. Mia's the family's failure. The words hung in the air like smoke. I watched my father's face, saw him look down at his plate rather than defend his daughter. I watched my mother whisper to my aunt, saw the knowing nods and sympathetic glances. She plays pretend on the internet while the rest of us build real careers, Damien said, raising his glass higher. But hey, we love her anyway, right? Even if she'll never understand what actual success looks like. The polite laughter that followed felt like a physical weight. But I smiled. I smiled because in exactly 60 hours, every person in this room would remember this moment with profound embarrassment. I smiled because Damien had just provided the perfect setup for his own destruction. To family, I said, raising my own glass, and to getting exactly what we deserve. Sunday passed in a blur of anticipation. I worked on client projects, answered emails, and prepared for the week ahead. At 6 p.m., I received a text from Patricia Chen. Press release goes live at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Thank you again for exceptional work. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning, I was awake before dawn. I made coffee, did yoga, and positioned myself at my laptop at exactly 8:55 a.m. At 9 a.m. sharp, my phone began buzzing, with notifications. The press release was comprehensive and detailed. Meridian Global announces strategic partnership with industry-leading brand strategist Mia Whitlock. The article highlighted my previous work, the scope of the project, and the expected impact on Meridian's global presence. Most importantly, it mentioned that I had been selected after an extensive search process that included several prominent marketing firms. By 9:30 a.m., the story had been picked up by 3 industry publications. By 10 a.m., it was trending on LinkedIn. By noon, I'd received congratulatory messages from colleagues, former clients, and industry leaders I'd never even met. But the message I was waiting for came at 2:17 p.m. It was from Damien. We need to talk, now. I didn't respond. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was my mother. Mia, sweetheart, I just saw the most interesting article online. About you and some big company? Her voice was confused, like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Oh, that, I said casually. Yes, it's a nice project. Should keep me busy for the next couple of years. But the article says it's worth nearly $3 million? That's correct. There was a long pause. And you've been working on this for how long? About 6 months. They approached me through professional contacts. Another pause, longer this time. Mia, I need to ask you something. When Damien said at dinner that your work wasn't, when he called me the family's failure, I supplied helpfully. Did you know? About this contract, I mean? Did you know when he said those things? I considered my answer carefully. Mom, I've been successful for years. My income has exceeded Damien's for the past 3 years. I own my apartment outright, I have clients on 4 continents, and I've been featured in industry publications that people in marketing actually read. The fact that our family has chosen to see me as a failure says more about our family than it does about me. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. We didn't know, she whispered finally. You didn't ask. Tuesday brought the news I'd been expecting. Jake called me, his voice strained. Mia, did you hear about Damien? What? About Damien? He got fired. Cromwell let him go yesterday afternoon. Apparently, losing the Meridian contract was the final straw. They'd been having problems for months, and this was supposed to be their comeback opportunity. I made appropriately sympathetic noises while internally celebrating. The thing is, Jake continued, I'm in a tough spot too. My firm is hemorrhaging money and I need to make some changes. I know I didn't pay you much for that branding work, but it's been the most effective marketing investment I've ever made. Would you be interested in doing more work with us? At your full rate this time? Send me a proposal, I said. I'll consider it. By Wednesday, 2 more of Damien's former clients had reached out to me. By Friday, I'd signed contracts with all 3 companies, effectively absorbing the majority of Cromwell and Associates' remaining business. The frame arrived at Damien's apartment. His penthouse had been too expensive to maintain without a job, the following Monday. I'd had it delivered with a bouquet of white lilies, a flower traditionally associated with rebirth and new beginnings. The delivery receipt showed it was signed for at 2:30 p.m. He never responded. 6 months later, I stood on the stage of the Grand Ballroom at the Meridian Tower, looking out at an audience of 300 marketing professionals, industry leaders, and distinguished guests. The annual Digital Marketing Innovation Summit was the most prestigious event in our field, and I was the keynote speaker. Good evening, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system. I want to talk to you tonight about the difference between playing the game and changing the rules. In the 3rd row, I spotted my parents. They sat with expressions I'd never seen before, a mixture of pride, amazement, and what might have been shame. My mother wore a navy blue dress I'd never seen, and my father had traded his usual business casual for a sharp suit. They'd driven 3 hours to be here. Too often in our industry, we mistake activity for achievement, I continued. We focus on the appearance of success rather than the substance of impact. We play politics instead of pursuing excellence. Tonight, I want to challenge you to choose substance over style, innovation over imitation, and authentic value over artificial prestige. The presentation I gave that night was the culmination of everything I'd learned, not just about marketing, but about life. I talked about the importance of defining success for yourself rather than accepting others' definitions. I discussed the power of quiet confidence in a world obsessed with loud self-promotion. I shared case studies from my work with Meridian and other clients, demonstrating how authentic storytelling could transform brands and drive genuine business results. During the Q&A session, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. Ms. Whitlock, you've achieved remarkable success in a relatively short time. What advice would you give to someone who feels overlooked or underestimated in their family or workplace? I paused, thinking not just about my answer, but about the journey that had brought me to this moment. I'd tell them that other people's inability to see your value doesn't diminish your worth, I said. Success isn't about proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's about building something meaningful, serving clients who appreciate your work, and creating value that speaks for itself. The validation you're seeking from others already exists within your own achievements. Trust it. The applause was thunderous. After the event, during the networking reception, my parents approached me. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father kept clearing his throat like he was trying to dislodge difficult words. Mia, my mother began. We owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. We had no idea, my father added. About your success, about your reputation in the industry, about any of it. We didn't understand. I studied their faces, looking for signs of manipulation or conditional acceptance. What I saw instead was genuine remorse and something that might have been respect. I tried to tell you, I said simply, multiple times. But you were more interested in the story you'd already decided to believe. We were wrong, my mother said. About you, about your work, about what success looks like. We're proud of you, sweetheart. We should have been proud all along. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. We talked about family dynamics, about assumptions and expectations, about the difference between love and support, They asked about my work, really asked, and listened to my answers with attention they'd never shown before. "What about Damien?" my father asked eventually. I'd been expecting this question. "What about him?" "He's been struggling, lost his job, can't find anything comparable. He's been living with his in-laws and—" My father paused. "He says you destroyed his career deliberately." "I didn't destroy his career," I said calmly. "I succeeded at mine. If his career couldn't survive my success, that says something about the foundation it was built on." "But you knew," my mother pressed, "about the Meridian contract. You knew when he gave that toast that you'd already won the deal he was chasing." I considered my response carefully. This was the moment of truth, the point where I could either maintain the facade of innocent coincidence or acknowledge the calculated nature of my revenge. "Yes," I said finally. "I knew." The admission hung between us like a bridge that could either connect us or burn beneath our feet. "Good," my father said quietly. I blinked in surprise. "Good?" What he said that night about you being the family's failure, that was cruel. Unnecessarily cruel. And it wasn't the first time. My father's voice was heavy with regret. "We enabled his behavior for years. We let him diminish you because it was easier than confronting the truth about our own failures as parents. He needed to learn that actions have consequences," my mother added. "We failed to teach him that lesson. You didn't, over the following months." My relationship with my parents slowly rebuilt itself on a foundation of mutual respect rather than familial obligation. They began referring other people to my business, proudly sharing my successes with their friends, and including me in family decisions that had once been made without my input. My extended family underwent a similar transformation. Cousins who had once dismissed my work now sought my advice. Aunts and uncles who had participated in the casual cruelty of that dinner party now spoke of me with a respect that felt genuine rather than forced. As for Damien, he moved across the country 6 months after losing his job. I heard through family updates that he'd found work at a small marketing firm in Portland, at a significantly lower salary and with much less prestige than he'd been accustomed to. His marriage had ended, his penthouse had been sold, and his social media presence, once filled with humble brags and lifestyle photos, had gone silent. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but no sympathy either. He'd spent years systematically undermining my confidence and reputation, convinced that his success required my failure. The reversal of our fortunes wasn't cosmic justice. It was simply the natural result of talent rising and mediocrity falling. The sell. Last communication between us came 8 months after that dinner. It was a single text message. "I'm sorry." I read it, considered responding, and then deleted it without reply. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some bridges burn too completely to rebuild. This was both. Today, 2 years later, I run a successful consultancy with 12 employees and clients across 6 continents. We've been featured in Forbes Inc. and the Harvard Business Review. My apartment has been replaced by a house with a real office and a garden where I grow herbs and vegetables. I'm dating someone who knew nothing about my family history when we met, and was attracted to my confidence rather than intimidated by my success. Most importantly, I've learned to define success for myself. It's not about proving wrong the people who doubted me. It's about building something meaningful with people who appreciate good work. It's not about revenge or validation. It's about creating value and finding satisfaction in craft well executed. The family reunion this year was different. It was hosted by my cousin Sarah, whose wedding website I designed years ago. When she introduced me to her neighbors, she said, "This is my cousin Mia. She's the one I told you about, the marketing genius who works with all those big companies." I smiled, not because the praise felt good, though it did, but because it felt true. After years of being seen as less than I was finally being seen as exactly who I'd always been. Damien wasn't there. According to family updates, he'd started his own small consulting firm in Portland and was slowly rebuilding his career. I hoped he'd learned something from our experience, but I didn't spend much time thinking about it. During dinner, my mother raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she said, "and to recognizing success in all its forms. We're all proud of each other's achievements, and we're committed to supporting each other's dreams. It was a different kind of toast than the one Damien had given 2 years earlier. This one was built on truth rather than cruelty, on inclusion rather than exclusion, on love rather than spite. As I raised my glass, I thought about the girl I'd been, desperate for family approval, willing to accept crumbs of recognition, convinced that her worth was determined by other people's opinions. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her value and refused to accept anything less than she deserved. To family, I agreed, and to getting exactly what we deserve. This time, everyone at the table knew exactly what I meant. And this time, they were proud to be part of the story I was telling.